So, hello.
Hi.
Can you tell us the story of how the two of you met?
We met in college, and we actually, the first time we met, we were in a play together.
He was a street urchin.
Yes, and Marta was a whore.
This is
And
true.
Tennessee Williams' play, Camino Real. But we didn't really get to know each other then. We didn't get to know each other until about 2 years later. Because Marta had gone away, junior abroad, and then came back, and we were in a directing class together, and someone had approached you to direct a production of Godspell.
And I asked him if he would be in it, and he said, no, but I'll direct it with you.
Yeah, because I decided I do not want to be an actor. I'm really not good at this. But I thought, oh, directing looks like fun. And so we directed this production of Godspell together. And it was really fun. And we really enjoyed doing stuff together. And so then we said, well, let's do something else. And then, I don't even know which of us said it. Said, why don't we write something? Like that's what you do. Like, yeah, let's write something. How about it'll be a musical? Sure.
We have a barn.
Yeah, I mean, neither of us had written plays. We certainly hadn't written musicals. And okay.
So we wrote this angst-driven collegiate comedy.
Yeah, it had a lot of pain and pathos about being a college student.
Rough time of your life.
Yes.
Very hard time.
And we got friends of ours to help us write it. We had Seth Friedman and Billy Dreskin, who's now a rabbi.
He also played Jesus in Godspell.
Yes. Anyway, so it had this wonderful sort of let's put on a show feeling, and we did. We actually booked the theater space and then started writing.
It's called Pressure.
Yeah, and it was really fun, and we just kept going from there.
What do you think your first, do you remember what your first impressions were of each other?
Well, at least I'm the hooker. I think might have been my first. I don't know.
No, I don't. Actually, because, I mean, when we first met, it was just like just people in a play together. We really weren't close at all.
It was doing Godspell. And it was one of those relationships where you very quickly realize, this is fun.
Yeah, and I think we also realized that we complemented each other very well.
How? What were the strengths?
I think I tend to be more analytical. Marta tends to be more emotional. I don't know. We found ourselves finishing each other's sentences really early on, and that's usually a really good sign.
Okay.
We also, after we did that first one, which was, by the way, called Waiting for the Feeling.
Yeah. Well-titled play.
We did another one the following year. I graduated, and I was driving up from New York. I was in acting school at the time. Don't ask. But every weekend we would get together and write this other play. We did something called Personals, which, and both of these went to the American College Theater Festival. We got to do them in D.C. And then Personals they offered that we go on a USO tour through Germany and Italy. And we said, well, hey, if the play is going to Germany and Italy, we want to be in it.
And so that was our brief little period of acting together again. And it did this crazy USO tour, playing for American troops for 8 weeks.
People sitting, 2 feet away from us with M16s on their laps.
Yeah, it was a really fun. It was a more fun life experience
Yeah.
than a theater experience.
Yeah.
But
A lot of the soldiers had never seen theater before, so when you ask a question on stage, they will answer it.
it was fun. It was really fun.
What appealed to you about writing? Because you said, you just got together and said, hey, let's write something. So
It's much more fun than sitting on the other side of the table being judged.
Yeah, I would say that's a lot of it. Is that also there is for me anyway. There's a little distance at least. I mean, you're still very invested in what you write, but I think when you're an actor and they go, I don't like it. It is you. It is you. At least if they say you don't like it, you can go, all right, show me what you don't like, and then we can talk about the work, and the work is somehow removed from you enough that it isn't totally devastating all the time.
I also think there's something about, and I've learned this recently, but I think it was probably true back then, and I think this is true, but I like telling stories. You get great pleasure from moving people to laugh or to once in a blue moon to a tear, and it's kind of thrilling to sit back and watch that.
So in college you were studying acting, not writing, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to write at that point, are you just feeling your way? How do you...
We used to improvise. I can remember sitting in your room
Mm-hmm.
when you were living in graduate housing,
Mm-hmm.
and we would improvise scenes and then go, what do we do? And try to write it down because we liked it.
Yeah,
We did a lot of that.
we stopped doing that.
We did.
Yeah. I think for me personally, one of the reasons I was happy to stop being an actor is I wasn't that good at it, and the actors who I really admire have a craft. It isn't there's a real skill set. It isn't just, I mean, yes, they're wonderful performers and they're sort of a magical something that you can't identify about them, but they also have amazing skills. So they can make choices. I never found as an actor I could make a choice. It was just whatever came out, came out. And what I like about writing is that you can you can do sort of meticulous work and start to make decisions and craft something. And I think that's what our little journey is sort of discovering that. Like, it was mostly about rewriting. It was doing draft after draft after draft and realizing, oh, so this is what writing is.
So you kind of taught yourselves structure and format and things like that as you were going.
You should see Waiting for the Feeling, yeah.
Yeah. And I think in general, like in terms of even shifting to television a little bit, yeah, I think, I imagine we'll talk a little bit later about our first TV job where we're running a show and we've never worked on a TV show before. And so, yes, we've done a lot of jumping in and learning as you go.
And I also want to add to what you're saying about writing versus acting. I found the one thing I could never do as an actor is let go of being self-conscious. And there's none of that when you're writing. It's such an intellectual process, and sometimes very instinctual. Sometimes things will come out and you didn't know that's what you were thinking. But you don't have that huge editing device standing in the way of you and the result.
So when you're writing plays, was there ever any intention of writing for television at that point? Any thought about it?
No. We were living in New York and writing musicals and writing plays, and our agent, or the woman who would become our agent, came and saw this show Personals, which by this point is being done off Broadway, and said, "Have you two thought of doing TV?" And we basically went, "Really?" And so we started, and it's the most, no one should ever start a TV career this way. She said, come up with 10 ideas for shows and we'll take it around and pitch them. And we hadn't written television. So we had like all these crazy ideas for TV shows, some of which I look back on and go, really? You were really trying to sell that? And we would just pitch them around, and eventually she had us flying out here to try to pitch them over, and eventually we sold a script. But we
were still doing musical theater in New York at the time, though.
Yeah, just going back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
You sold a script for a TV show.
We did. It was through a company in New York, Nederlander Television, and we developed it for them, and we came out here and sold it here, and it was it's talk about your first work not being your best work. I haven't gone back and read. It was called Just a Guy, and it was really just about a guy, and it's just it was so non. Do you remember this? It's this non-concept sort of. I don't know. It was really lame. Okay. But we sold it. We sold something. And
we sat in the rental car,
yeah,
screaming.
Yeah, it was great. And then, at least then you've sold something. And people could say, well, they sold something. I mean, it didn't get produced. And then we were able to sell a few more scripts that didn't get produced. And we were shuttling back and forth from New York to L.A. But at least we'd sold something.
So as far as a writing partnership, when do you feel you formalized that? Because, you sort of started off with just, hey, let's do this. Do you think it was with the agent or?
No, it was before then.
It was a combination of things. David and I continued to complement each other in every way possible in terms of what we love about the work, what we are strong at, what we're weaker at. We were always there for each other for that. And it was a wonderful working relationship from the beginning. There was a period of time, and we were deciding, there was a project that we were deciding, I think it was a screenplay. And this is when we were still working with Seth Friedman. We were trying to decide, and this was the moment for me. This is when everything changed.
I don't know where this is going, so this is...
You don't like this story.
Oh, great.
We met with our agent, and she said, you have 24 hours to decide if you're going to do this just the two of you or if you're going to do it with Seth. And it was a rainy 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. And I was heading home, and I thought, I'll never get a cab, so I waited at the bus. It's raining, and I'm miserable. And I kept thinking, I need a sign because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right thing is to do. I don't know what to do. I need a sign. 20 minutes I waited for a bus. No bus comes. A taxi cab pulls up in front of me. A guy gets out. I'm like, okay, I'll take the cab. I get in the cab. I close the door. I sit back, and I thought, a sign. And I sit up, and I look at the license of the cab driver, and his name was David Yu. I still get chills when I think about it, and I thought, that's it. That's it. And for me, that was the moment that I knew this would be the partnership.
That is a great story.
Thank you. And David's he's like,
oh, that story. The old cab story? That thing?
So let's talk about Dream On and how you got involved with that.
Well, Dream On is definitely one of those things where you don't think something's going to, the last thing you think is going to turn into a project, it turns into a project. We were going back and forth, still living in New York. We'd taken some meetings out here about various projects. We were about to fly back, and we got a call from Nancy, our agent, who said, one more meeting, go see these people. They've got some film clips or something. And we're like, really? Like, we're catching a plane today. Go, go, go. So we go to this meeting.
They have to understand, they have interviewed thousands of writers, and they're now scraping the bottom of the barrel talking to two musical theater writers from New York.
Yeah. They basically, Universal has this big archive of black and white TV footage, and they were looking to somehow make money off of it, do something with it. And so people are pitching game shows and Mystery Science Theater 3000 type things. And we went in, and they showed us 6 minutes of black and white clips and said, what would you do? Anything. We were like, we have absolutely no idea.
Let us think about
let us go. So we on the plane, we're talking, and we came up with the idea of like, well, you could do a thing about a guy, and he has thoughts like he's like us. He grew up on TV, and they're like thought bubble sort of a thing. And by the time we got off the plane, we had an idea. We got home, we called, we said, here's what we do, and we laid it out, and they went, come back. So we got back, and we came back, and John Landis was the executive producer, and And we hadn't met him, and suddenly we're pitching it to him, and he's like, yeah, let's do that. And we're like, oh, wow, okay. And suddenly this was another case where we're writing a script, and again, with no expectation that it would become a TV show. None. And at that point, we thought, here's what TV is. TV is they pay you to write scripts that they never make. All right, that's all right. And then, actually, in between, we moved out here because we got sick of going back and forth. And then we got the call, they're making it. John called and said, yeah, we're shooting it. We were like,
That doesn't
what?
happen.
Yeah. And it was this great cast, Brian Benben and Wendy Malick. And
It was a blast.
Yeah.
We used to call it guerrilla theater. Because guerrilla television, because we were out in the middle of nowhere in this warehouse. There was nothing but us and a bar. There was nothing there.
It was this, and this was a case of our first job was running a show. Amazingly, they didn't bring in writers above us. They let us, and this is a testament to John, and also at this point they brought in Kevin Bright, who became our partner for long after that. But Kevin and John went, yeah, they can do this. And we were like, yeah, all right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was like no budget, so there wasn't a big writing staff, but we were actually talking to a couple of writer friends going, okay, so you hire writers. And we really didn't know. We were like, and then you sit around and you talk about like what the episodes could be, and then does someone go off and write it, or do you write it as we would know? And we
And they
learned.
were like, you use a writer's assistant. I'm sorry, what's that?
We don't know anything. And what was great was they're all looking at us like, I hate you. I've been trying to get this for how many years? And you what? Your first job is this? And so Marta turned to me and said, we can't ask anyone anymore. We cannot ask people anymore. They do not like us when we ask them. And so we're kind of winging it. And we had, I think we had 3 writers the first season, Jeff Greenstein and Jeff Strauss and Dava Savell. And we just were like, okay, we know what we think's funny. And we just started pitching stories and breaking stories, and we did 13 the first season.
We were so lucky. We were so lucky for it to happen this way, because we got to develop a way of working that worked for us. I think our writers were basically happy in their jobs because it was a very democratic room, because we didn't know any other way to do it. We didn't know that you could say, yeah, whatever you say, I'm going to write it myself. And it was we were just so lucky.
Now, how did HBO get involved? Were they involved from the very beginning?
Yeah, it was. No. It wasn't HBO.
No, it was
and
Universal by themselves at first, and then
was it?
I think we sold it to HBO.
But certainly when
But this was the beginning of series for them. They weren't.
Yeah, before us, I think the only
First and 10
was the only scripted series they'd done. But yeah, they were involved. I know by the time we were shooting the pilot, so I don't know what order things happened in. But
And
they were great because they were hands off. They were like, just let us do it.
Okay, so they did let you. They
Oh
didn't
my
have
God!
a lot of
Yes,
involvement.
that's the
Everybody
crazy.
did.
They just we were in this warehouse up in North Hollywood.
Nobody wanted to go there.
So maybe once or twice a season, the network would show up and say hi, and there'd be a table read or two. And other than that, we were just making the show.
Once in a while, we'd get a note on a script.
But really nothing. And we were very spoiled.
Now, why do you think that the show was a hit for HBO? Because it was sort of the first. They were doing this show, Dream On, but they were also doing, I think, Tales from the Crypt. But Dream On was really their first, what they called a hit, and they were really talking it up. That the subscribers were going through the roof. Why do you think that show hit?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't think we're the people to answer that question. We were just like making it. We were making ourselves laugh.
The clips were a fun addition. Ronald and Nancy Reagan were in them, and
It was dirty. It was
fair
HBO.
bit of sex.
Yeah.
At the time, that was very important. That
Yeah, it was. I mean, you needed to have things that would make it a show that you couldn't show on network television, and so there was a bit. I remember our very first draft. That was one of John Landis' notes. He goes, it needs to be funnier, it needs to be dirtier. Yeah. We're like, okay, we can do that.
Once you start writing cunnilingus in a script, you know you're not on network anymore.
How would you describe the comedy of Dream On?
Hopefully it was real, that it was based in truth and character and emotion and not just jokes. We don't really write good jokes. They're much better joke writers than we are. But hopefully it had some nice sort of
By the way, you write
emotional
good jokes.
You're very sweet, but no, I don't think we do. But that's okay, because we've always been with people who did write really good jokes.
So we talked a lot about the clips and what that was to the show. What was the premise? You just give us a little description of the
It was
premise.
about a man who is going through a divorce and just trying to manage his life. And he grew up on television, and that's where his thoughts would go. They were just examples of his thoughts. And I think part of what was nice about it is he was a regular guy. There was nothing extraordinary about him. He was.
That's what Just a Guy should have been. Yeah.
He had a son. He was sort of floundering at everything.
Yeah, but a very relatable everyman.
He had more sex than most people do, but besides that.
Yes.
Well, it was HBO. He had access.
He had to.
So how did you go about using the clips? The process of that did you write to the clips you knew you had? How did you choose them?
On the pilot,
shifted.
on the pilot, they gave us like 50 hours of black and white TV to watch. So we watched 50 hours of black and white TV, found the things we thought were just hilarious, and we had a story, but there are places where we really wrote to the clip. Once we started doing the series, you couldn't really go that way.
So we then had a couple of guys who had an intimate knowledge of all the clips, and what we would do is we would write our ideal clip. You know, that Martin does something, 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 and then we would literally write clip with a colon, and this is what we want the clip to be. And they would look for things that would somehow
serve the moment. And it was some really bright, funny guys who became great writers were doing it. Because it was a creative job. They had this huge database, but then you'd ask for something, but then they'd come in with a stack of tapes, because back then there was tapes, and they'd come in with a stack of tapes, and they'd put in the videotapes, and this is kind of what you were asking for, but also consider this, and then they'd put in a thing that wasn't at all what you'd asked for, but it was hilarious and funny, and yeah.
Did you have any favorites that you can remember? Favorite clips or favorite shows that you used?
No, I do remember, and this is kind of dark. Very early on, we were still just started shooting the first season, and we were midway through, and we'd got all the clips, and then we found out that someone had misunderstood the SAG rules or whatever. But if an actor was deceased before like 1964, I don't have the specifics, but it was like if they weren't deceased, we would have to pay for the clip, and no one was about to pay for the clip, so we'd have to replace the clip. So there was this awful, grim, hilarious day of finding out who's still alive and who's dead. And it's like Jane Wyman, dead or alive. And you're like, it's terrible what I'm rooting for. It's really bad. I do not feel good about myself, but please, because I love the clip. I love the clip. It was a rather dark day.
I hope it was at least fast.
Yeah.
You talked about Kevin Bright coming on as a producer on the show. What was it like working with him on that first show? Because you obviously teamed up with him later. What was it like working with him, and what was it about him that made you decide you wanted to do this, the three of you together?
Well, he did all the stuff that neither of us wanted to do. He did all the post stuff.
And also he did the producing. I mean, he did all that nuts and bolts, make the show look great.
Hiring the crew.
Yeah, really, really talented producer. And it's a show that lived and died in the editing room, and he was magnificent at that. Yeah. And then at a certain point he started directing, and the shows were great, and the decision to become partners, part of it was he's really good at a lot of stuff that A, we're not great at, and B, I'll speak for myself especially, really don't care about. And the idea of having this wonderful third creative partner was very exciting.
Particularly the business side of producing, neither of us were fond of. So it was a relief to us, and it also made us as a unit very viable. Where otherwise we're just writers who can run our show, but we'll always need a Kevin Bright. So hey, we have a Kevin Bright.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
How do you think Dream On influenced HBO's programming from then on, future programming?
I think only that they saw that series could work on their network. Beyond that, I wouldn't know, but I assume that was their big lesson: is this can work for us. Mm-hmm. People will come to HBO to watch things that have no commercials.
You were nominated for an Emmy for writing the episode For Peter's Sake. What stood out about that episode? Do you think that it was why it was nominated?
It dealt with a really powerful subject.
I think early on it dealt with
it was about AIDS, and Martin, who played a book editor, was editing a book written by a guy who's dying, and the cast was magnificent, and Betty Thomas directed it beautifully, and Gwen Verdon was in it, and yeah, it was one of those episodes that really come together in a way that you're just very proud of.
Did you attend the ceremony, the Emmy ceremony?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, we were nominated for an Emmy. I remember when we were nominated, and we were working on another show at that point, and one of the writers said, we came in that morning. It's like, yeah, we were nominated for writing in a comedy, and he went, like cable comedy? Went, no, real comedy, honestly, just like all the other shows. So yeah, there was still a sort of attitude from people who'd spent a lot of time working on network television toward cable.
That night, I remember, it was such a... Are we allowed to curse on this? It was... Well, I will, and you can cut it out if you want. It was such a mindfuck because the actor who played Peter was presenting the award. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. So we were like, oh my God, that's such a good sign.
And Betty Thomas won the Emmy for directing that year for that episode.
We did not.
No, because, among other things, we were up against the Seinfeld masturbation episode.
And the puppy episode.
Yeah, it was like, why are we here? Why are we here? It's so, it's just like, yeah, here, just let's skip all the anxiety. But then when Betty won, there was a little... They've
and then
managed
when he was
to,
presenting, there was even more. So
yeah, no, they have managed to get us like
twisted
a number of times. Yes, we used to kid about the fact that at the Emmys when we were doing Friends for years didn't win, and it would always be, and the winner is Frasier. The amount of time it took them to say as time in our brains slowed down, and you went. Yeah, it was brutal.
People like starting to stand up, and then...
Oh, and my favorite is the year on Friends that they announced we were nominated and then took it away.
Because they read the wrong...
Yeah, someone had put up the wrong information on the teleprompter, and they put up the rehearsal card, which was the list of nominees from the previous year. So they announced we were nominated, and which was a great day in the writers' room, as each of the writers would come in and go, hey, I heard, and you'd go, no, it's not. What? Yeah. So, but we're not bitter because things have gone well.
Yeah, and truthfully, we used to make jokes about it. We used to say that we were the Susan Lucci of half-hour comedy.
Do you think that it influenced your career being nominated for that first one? No.
Not at all. I mean, honestly, and winning or losing Emmys, you know what? You come in, you do the work. It doesn't matter. The next morning, it doesn't matter. There's one evening where it matters a lot, and then after the hangover, it doesn't matter anymore.
But how do you think the show shaped your career from that point on?
How
You
Dream
took
On?
Dream On? It made us viable. I remember there was someone who we, for a number of years, had pitched to, a head of comedy at one of the networks. And he was never a fan. I mean, in fact...
He literally, one
Yes.
time when we were pitching, and we're not low energy, was holding his
It was
eye
that
open.
afternoon after lunch thing where it's like, oh, come on, really? We're this close. We can see you doing that. And then Dream On came on the air, and we came into our next pitch meeting, and he was like, you guys, and we were like, wow, look how that changed. Suddenly we're hilarious.
The other way it affected our career is Dream On there was one guy, he had to be in every scene because those clips only came from his brain. So, and it was really hard on the actor. Brian Ben worked his butt off. And, by Friday he was ready to, his head was about to explode. So, one of the things we said is our next show has to be an ensemble. We're not going to do that again because that's hard.
Yeah.
How did you come to work with Norman Lear on a show called Sunday Dinner?
When we were writing a musical. We were writing the musical version of the movie Arthur. We were living in New York, and we had been told that it takes 7 years from when you first think of a show till it gets on to Broadway or off Broadway. 7 years. So we said, okay. And Nancy, our agent, was saying, you got to come to LA, you got to come to LA. We kept saying, no, we're musical theater writers. We'll fly out and visit once in a while. And then we were in our 6th year and said, okay, we give it 1 more year. If it doesn't happen, if this show doesn't go by the end of this year, then we'll consider coming to LA. 7th year hit, didn't go on. We call Nancy and we say, okay, we're ready. And she goes, you just missed pilot season. All right, we'll come out anyway. We didn't, want to do somebody else's
Yeah,
show.
we didn't really understand what pilot season was. Yeah. We didn't understand about jobs. Yeah. We really knew nothing.
Now, also, I have to say, during this period, to make money, we were writing questions for a game show his father hosted.
A local Philadelphia... The Knowledge Bowl. Yes. So we're writing questions about math. And our musical isn't happening yet again. Marta has just had a baby.
We have no money.
And so we just went the hell with it, and that's it. It was very impulsive. And so we said, we're going to come out and find us some work. And back then, people were making just pure development deals. And so she got us in a meeting with Norman Lear and Deborah All, who was running his company, and they'd read our stuff, and we're like, this is before Dream. We'd written the pilot for Dream On, but it hadn't been shot. So we're theoretical at this point. We've never written anything that's been made. And they went, yeah, come on out and develop. And so suddenly we had jobs. And so we were developing for Norman Lear.
So we wrote our first pilot for their company, and
okay, he hated it, and
what happened? It was the day we were packing up to go do Dream On.
We'd just gotten the call,
and we were suspending and extending our contract so that we could go do Dream On.
So we got the call. Dream On is happening. It's going to be a series. We're like, oh my god. So the good news today is Dream On's happening. The bad news is Norman hates your pilot. And Norman was like, it's Norman Lear. It's Norman Lear. And we love, and he's a doll, and he's wonderful. He just doesn't get it. And
doesn't get us.
And we run into him in the hallway. And he's going in to talk to the woman who's running his company, who had liked the script, and he was very sweet.
And we're packing up our offices.
Yeah, and he's very sweet because he feels the need to sort of explain to us what he didn't like about our script, which, at that point, we were kind of like, you know what, we're leaving. We're going to go. We don't need, okay. And then...
So he comes up, and he very kindly and reassuringly takes, I think, I may have been the first one whose hand he took, and we were in the kitchen, and he looks at me and he goes, just that it was shallow. Yeah. And he grabs David by the arms.
And he's great. I mean, it's Norman.
And he says, and it was superficial.
It's just you guys. And it was one of those, he goes, and he was talking about it for a while, about what he didn't like about it, which, frankly, that he took the time to do that was wonderful. And yet, at the same time, all we're hearing is shallow and superficial. It was like the crawl at the bottom of our brains, shallow and superficial, shallow and superficial.
We called ourselves that for quite a while.
Oh my God! And so then we left. It was one of those like packing up the office, and we did everything but take the phone.
Stapler.
Yeah. And then we went off and did Dream On. Which we did the first scene of Dream On, and suddenly we're feeling better about ourselves. But
not superficial and shallow.
Not so superficial and shallow, or if we are, apparently people like it. But then we still owe our deal, so we still owe them a show. And we were talking not with Norman, but with a guy who was at this point in charge, and we said, he doesn't like the work. He doesn't get us, which is fine. Can't we just... It was like, no, because now Dream On's kind of a big deal, and so they can't let the deal go. So he said, no, come on, you come up with something. So we came up with...
So we're thinking, all right, the man doesn't like us. Let's come up with something they won't
He likes
make.
us, by the way. This
Not
should be
us,
said.
He doesn't like our writing.
He was so sweet to us, but doesn't care for what we write.
We're thinking, let's come up with something they won't make, because let's be honest, it's not going to happen.
And we have to go back to another... We're on our little hiatus on Dream On. We got to go back to our thing. So
we decide to come up with something that nobody wants to do. They were saying no politics that year.
It was absolutely the producers. We came up with a show...
About a senator.
Yes, in Washington, which we're told is, you cannot sell politics. You cannot sell Washington.
His wife is abusive to the maid, and she's gay. She's a lesbian. He's having an affair with his executive assistant.
Right. All the characters are completely
reprehensible. His daughter is bulimic. His son-in-law is suicidal.
Yes, in the pilot, the son-in-law tries to kill himself, and the in the first scene, the senator's wife slaps the maid, and we meet the senator in his mistress's bed. I mean, we just was like, we were having a good time, but we're thinking they'll
never make it.
Oh no, it was ridiculous, and so we first go in to pitch it to Norman. And honestly, this one was pretty shallow and superficial. Admittedly, it was big and broad and very broad strokes, and it wasn't about feelings or anything. And we start to pitch it, and Norman starts laughing. We're like, no.
What?
And so then we go and we pitch it, and it's the guy we were just talking about, who we pitched it to, who suddenly were hilarious, and
we're thinking,
he's loving it.
This is impossible. This is never... You're kidding me. I mean, literally, one of the first scenes is a guy trying to kill himself, trying to hang himself by the drapery cord, and he ends up opening the drapes. But the first scene, guy's trying to commit suicide.
Yeah, and it's very broad, and so CBS buys it first, because it changed networks at one point.
It was first CBS.
Anyway, so they buy it, and...
Make it!
And the cast, I've got to say...
Brilliant cast.
Brilliant. I mean, it was David Hyde Pierce and Holland Taylor and...
John Forsythe. What's his name?
What's his name? Peter McNichol, Valerie Mahaffey. It was just an amazing cast, and it was hilarious, and it ran 2 years.
And what was the title of this show?
Powers That Be.
Powers That Be.
Yeah, and it ran 2 years. And
however, we did not run it.
No. We because we were doing Dream On,
and because and honestly, because they may have liked Dream On, but I don't think the networks completely trusted that we could run a network show, so they brought in people over us.
And so we were supervised, and
it was kind of a bummer.
But you know what? But because we had the show we were in love with, we were able to go back to that, and we would come and visit it once a week. We would
pass the baton to each other on the freeway.
So, did you work with Norman at all then during those two?
We did on the show itself, because once Powers That Be was happening, he was very involved in that. And
this came from a notion he had. We should say it came from an idea that he had about someone who's a child he didn't know he had a grown child comes back into his life and disrupts it.
Right, you're absolutely right. And then we ended up setting that's
why
the thing.
It was called Sunday Dinner, and then we changed it to Powers That Be.
No, Sunday Dinner was something else. Sunday Dinner was the thing that he did. That was the thing he did with Robert Loggia. This is see, it's 20-something years ago. We're not young.
Right.
Did you ever tell Norman that you purposely came up with an idea that you didn't think would go?
Did you?
I
haven't.
Well, what happened was, he and I were doing a photo shoot for the Producers Guild. And I hadn't seen him in I don't know how many years. And I mean, like David said, I love Norman, have enormous respect for him. That was kind of difficult because he didn't love our work previous to this whole thing. So I didn't know how it would be seeing Norman, and we were in the middle of shooting this still photography thing, and he says, I made a mistake. And I'm like, what? And he says, I should have had you guys run the show. It was a big mistake. And I think the next shot was me going.
Wow. You never told me this. Okay.
I didn't?
No. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm so sorry.
Wow. So then did you tell him the whole genesis of us pitching the show
I
that
did.
everyone would hate?
I did.
And what did he say?
He left.
Because ultimately it was a really fun show, and the cast was awesome, and he was very involved in it. He was actually much more involved in the actual show than we were.
Would you say that you learned anything working with him?
This is going to seem unfair, but I did learn, don't do a show you're not going to be involved in. That if you're going to do these things, do them. And I had to learn that lesson a lot.
Yeah.
Several times before.
And
finally
don't do
learning
a show that you don't have in your heart,
Yeah. I mean, I think it was very interesting because we do have a very different writing style than Norman. We just do, and at first for me, I found it I sort of bristled because it was so different and the kind of stuff, and had been a huge fan of like All in the Family,
and Maude.
So then to find out, it's such a, the styles are so incompatible, and I think ultimately got to the place of respecting the difference. But
there was a period of time we had done an episode of television. We were still living in New York, of Everything's Relative.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And we wrote an episode. Our very first thing that ever made it had our names on it. And we did this episode, and we were not on staff, and we just sort of handed it over, and yay, we're gonna see our thing on the TV. Not a single word. Literally
rewritten down to the last comma.
And there was a little bit of that in once we were in series. The pilot was really ours, but then once we were in series, we were not in charge. So it wasn't up to us what got on screen. And I think we may have been naive, but we weren't wrong when we first came out here and said we can't work on other people's shows, because that's just who we are. We have a great need for control, and that was uncomfortable. Not being in control and having someone else's taste. And it's not that it's bad taste, it's just that it's not our taste. And here our names are on something that we're not running, and it was uncomfortable.
Was there any sort of pressure, do you think, because he was known for these groundbreaking shows, All in the Family, Maude, like you mentioned, and then this show, it ran for 2 seasons, but did not, I don't think, didn't make the same impression with audiences. Do you think there was pressure on him, or did you feel any pressure? This is a Norman Lear
Once they
show.
took us out of running it, we didn't feel any pressure. Now it was up to them. There was nothing we could do.
We would come in like once or twice a week and offer thoughts, but it's that thing of either you're doing it or you're not doing it.
And I have to say, I really liked the pilot.
I'd even go as far as to say I really liked the original pilot, because it managed to, it was sort of overstuffed, and so we ended up stretching it into an hour, which was at the time.
I forgot that.
Yeah, and so the show that aired was an hour, and half-hour shows should not be an hour. There's a reason half-hour shows are half-hour shows, or else you really have to earn them. but the original script was a really fun
Yeah.
piece of writing that I'm proud of.
So then, what was Family Album?
Okay.
We were here. We were at Warner Brothers. We were developing for Lorimar at the time. And the first year that we were developing, we wrote 2 scripts. We sold two pilots. One was Family Album, and the other one was called Couples. We did 3.
No, that season we did 2. I really feel like some old couple. No, it wasn't. No, you're not remembering correctly. We did 2, and the following season we ended up doing 2 as well. And in both cases, one amazingly easy, flows right out of you, and the other one pulling teeth. And this season it was the show Couples and Family Album. Couples, we wrote it in like a week. We love it. It's about 3 couples, and it's smart, and it's single camera, and it's got everything we want. Family Album is a multi-camera show about a family. Was a great pitch. And that was one of those lessons of, sometimes you can pitch it and it's really, really hard to write when you go to write it.
Didn't that come, though, didn't Peter Tortorici have an idea that he said, I need something in an area of blah, 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 and that's
families? I don't know. It was pretty, we drew on our own lives. We did everything right. We drew on our own lives. It was about this family from Philadelphia. We had characters based on our parents. We did all this stuff. And yet it just, for some reason, the DNA was wrong, and it was incredibly hard to write. And then they pass on Couples and they pick up Family Album. And
we shot them both.
It's one of those experiences where you get into a room and you learn very quickly either you have a show and the show is sort of feeding you and exciting you, or you don't. And this was a case of it was just hard. Everything about it was hard. And some really good actors and
great staff.
Yeah, and it never completely worked, and they canceled us after 6, I think.
Yeah, they wanted a couple more scripts. We were going to write them all in Yiddish just to,
Yeah, well, you can write some scripts. It's like, hey, you know what? Thanks.
All right.
We're good. Yeah, and so it was just, they can't all be winners.
And the following year we did 2 pilots. Again, one that just flowed out of us, one that was incredibly difficult, but that year they picked the right one.
And that was Friends. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about Friends. How did you get the idea originally to write the show?
Well, like I said, we were still reacting to, we're not going to have a single star. We want an ensemble show. And, we had just moved out here to LA from New York, where we were in a group of friends that had all graduated from college, and we were all sort of in it together, and we did everything together. That was part of it.
And I think we were very much drawn toward the idea of a low concept show. And it was like the strong sort of headline was, it's that time of your life when your friends are your family. But beyond that, very little plot, very little premise. It was like, and I remember pitching it, and we were just saying, and basically we're just in their lives, and here are the 6 characters, and they're specific, but we're in and out of their apartments, and they go about doing stuff.
We actually were driving along, I think it was Beverly Boulevard, and we saw a place called the Insomnia Cafe. And I remember we were talking about, hey, that would be a cool place to have as one of our main sets. It just sounds, we liked the idea of something being over-caffeinated.
What was the other pilot?
It was called Reality Check. It was a thing we did for Fox. It was a single-camera show about a teenage kid and his fantasy life. And there was a moment where we thought, because it had again a really good cast: Giovanni Ribisi, Hilary Swank. And they were just the best friends. And there was a moment where it looked like both shows were going to get picked up, and we were like, "Oh no! We've been through that." And Reality Check could not have been more arduous and difficult, and thankfully at the end it didn't happen.
So when you sit down to write the pilot for Friends, how did you come up with the characters, the individual characters, and did you draw from these people in your life when you were living in New York?
Well, we drew from people we knew. We were sitting in our office on the other side of the lot, and I can remember sitting there and talking about people in our lives we were at that point no longer of that age, but we just talked about types, people in our lives that we wanted to sort of model things after.
Yeah, and we just started talking, and it's not random, but you go, okay, these sound like 6 fun characters. You know, at the point when you're doing pilots, you're coming up with characters and storylines and characters. You're like, okay, do we have 6? I think we're good. All right, should we pitch it? Sure. There isn't a sort
there
of
are elements of us in each of in certain characters, things that we really attach to, and that there are elements of people we know or actors we've seen or.
Yeah, you don't think you're going to spend the next 10 years of your life doing this. So there is a kind of, yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, let's do it. And then went in and pitched it. And, it was sort of unassuming until it became more.
What was NBC's response to the pilot? Did they have things they wanted to change? Were they happy with what they saw?
There was one thing, and this was once. There were 2 things after seeing the pilot they really wanted to. Well, actually, let's go back.
At the point when we pitched it, the one thing I remember is, I think this was Warren Littlefield suggested, originally Joey and Chandler did not live next door to Monica and Rachel. And he said, why don't you put them, it'll just be easier. And we went, okay, sure, that's a fair thing to want. He said, you could call it Across the Hall. We went, or just have them be across the hall. But for the most part, they were very hands off.
They hated the color of the couch in the coffee house.
Okay.
Yes, I remember that vividly. It's when it went to red. It was like a skin tone.
Wow. Okay.
And there was a period of time that they really thought we needed to add a character who was older, maybe owned the coffee house they could get advice from. We used to call that character, in our minds, he was Pat the Cop.
You know, he'd come in, because they felt like we needed another demographic, because it was so narrow, but all these characters are the same age, you know, and the concept of people will watch the show because they like it, as opposed to they need to literally see themselves in it. So we even tried at one point to do an episode where Pat the Cop came into the coffee house, and we wrote it, and hated it so much, we called them up and we went, please don't make us do this. We'll pump up the guest stars. You'll see the parents a little bit more.
We unwrote it.
Yeah, we went, you please. We never actually cast it or shot it. We just said, it's awful. We're writing a note, and it feels like we're writing a note.
The only other thing was when we were shooting the pilot.
An executive? An
executive from a network, the network. He was giving us notes. Oops, said he was a he.
It's all right.
Giving us notes.
You'll know from the story it's a he.
And in the pilot, Monica sleeps with a guy. He tells her a story about how he'd had his heart broken and he hasn't been able to sleep with a woman in 3 years. And she sleeps with him and subsequently finds out that
it's a line. Yeah.
And this executive said, well, she got what she deserved.
At first, he didn't like the storyline because one of our main characters is sleeping with a guy on the first date. And it's like, well, what does that say about her? Doesn't that say she's a whore? And then ultimately his way of being okay with it was that and this was literally the line, we're in the notes meeting, and he said, and so she gets what she deserves, so he's okay with it. And I see Marta, and this is one of those moments where partners become partners. I see Marta.
Fire is coming out of my nose.
She goes, Excuse me one second. And so she gets up and she's like,
to leave.
she just like goes, and I'm like, anyway, yeah. So all right, so we're good to go with Sleeping with the Guy first date. Good, gets what she deserves. On board.
They literally they had a questionnaire for one of the test audiences that we had when we were doing dress run-throughs, and one of the questions was, for sleeping with a guy on the first date, do you think Monica is A, a whore, B, a slut, C, too easy?
And what was great was the audience questionnaire said, no, we like her. It's fine. And so we were fine. And I have to say, to the credit of the other executives at the network, they were all like, it's going to be cool. Don't worry. It's really good. It's really funny.
And
it works.
actually what we got from it, what we learned from it that I think helped the pilot was we had to make her invested in the relationship in a way so it wasn't just she slept with some guy to be nice to him or something, that she was actually invested in this person. And that helped the pilot, ultimately.
But it was a fun journey.
Those were the changes.
Now, was Friends the original title that you came up with?
No.
No.
Friends like
Jeffrey
Us.
Jeffrey had given us Friends Like Us, and then it was 6 of 1.
6 of 1.
And then when NBC called up to say, we're going to give you 8:30 on Thursday nights, which was kind of like, and here's your winning lottery ticket, they said, there's just one thing, we want to just call it Friends.
And Kevin said you can call it Kevorkian if you put it on at 8:30 on Thursday nights. We don't care.
Yeah.
So you were surprised that you got that time slot?
The whole process, as I was saying before, there was an element of, you're doing pilots. Here's another one. Here's the thing. We're going to call it It's About These Friends, and da-da-da-da. And then we found out that Jimmy Burrows wanted to direct it. And we were like, Jimmy Burrows, Cheers and everything. I don't know if there was a Frasier at that point, but it's Jimmy Burrows. And it's like, at that point, no, for us, he was James Burrows wants to direct it. And we're like, oh my God. So the whole project we were always surprised at how it kept happening.
It was so surreal. There was a moment, the first run through we went to, the first time all 6 of them were on stage together, that I remember getting chills up my spine when they all started to banter and thinking, I don't know if we'll ever get to do this again, but there's something really special right here. So yeah, every step of the way was surreal and shocking and weird. It was just weird.
Yeah, I think, and in terms of the success of the show, for a long time, we were aware of the ratings because you have to be, but we were so entrenched in making them that I don't think we really, until the end of the first season, had a sense of what the enormity of it was.
We walked through airports and would see their faces on a bunch of magazines, but that was them. That wasn't us.
And even then, at that point, it was just, you would go like, we're on the cover of something. Dream On was great, but it was really under the radar. And suddenly, for me, the first time I started to get a hint of it, it was Thanksgiving of that first year, so November. And I'm out to dinner with my parents and my partner, Jeffrey. And at a certain point, we're at dinner, and he goes, shh, listen. And at the next table, they were saying, oh, and did you see the one at the laundromat where they did it? And it was like, they're talking about our show, like at dinner. And Jeffrey said, remember this moment. Because this is the moment when you realize, oh, this is going to be something very different. And it's sort of, for me, the moment when I got it.
And the moment I remembered is the moment that he told me about it.
And those are our moments.
So how did you come up with the idea to title the shows The One With?
You did.
Yeah, I said, why don't we just do that? Because we're always going, which one is that? Oh, it's the one with the da-da-da-da-da. So why don't we just call them that?
Because we hate titles.
Yeah, all those sort of punning, wordplay. It's like, and you'd be in a writer's room and people go, is this really the title? And you'd pitch on the title and you're going, why are we pitching on the title? This is like taking too much time. So if we just did, all right, it's the one with the, and then you could just say what the episode was about, and it was a good handle for people to talk about.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break,